Have you ever wondered why sometimes God doesn't answer our prayers the way we hope? Why His plans seem to go against our deepest desires? Today I'm going to tell you something that just happened in the Vatican that will completely change how you see God's plans. It's a story so powerful that even Pope Leo XIV himself had to face a decision that touched his American heart. Just days ago, on May 22nd, the Catholic world received historic news. Pope Leo XIV, our new Holy Father, elected on May 8th, made his first major decision as Pope. And believe me, this decision teaches us something profound about how God's will works in our lives. Do you know what that decision was? To create the first Archdiocese of his pontificate. But here's the incredible part. Being from Chicago, with a deep love for America, Pope Leo XIV had the natural desire for his first archdiocese to be here in the United States. Imagine what an honor that would have been for us. However, something extraordinary happened that will teach us a spiritual lesson that can transform your life. The new pope decided to obey a legacy left by Pope Francis. Instead of following his American heart, he chose to elevate the Diocese of São José do Rio Preto, in the interior of São Paulo, Brazil, to the category of Archdiocese. This was the first archdiocese created in the entire Catholic world since he was elected. Before continuing with this story that will impact you, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between what your heart wants and what you feel God is asking of you? Tell me in the comments, because your experience could help other brothers and sisters watching this video. Your testimony might be exactly what someone needs to hear today. What I'm going to reveal about this Pope's decision teaches us 3 spiritual lessons so powerful they can completely change how you see God's plans for your life. If you feel you're at a crossroads, if you don't understand why God isn't responding as you hope, or if you simply want to better understand how divine will works, this video was made especially for you. To understand the deep meaning of this decision, we need to know the complete context. Pope Leo XIV, since his election on May 8th, has shown a special heart for America. His first words, his gestures, everything indicated a deep love for our culture and our faith. Many of us hoped his first major decision as Pope would somehow honor our beloved United States. But God had other plans. Pope Francis, before leaving the pontificate, had initiated a very special process in 2010. Brazilian bishops had requested that the Diocese of São José do Rio Preto be elevated to an archdiocese. This process had been slowly moving through Vatican corridors for 15 years, waiting for God's perfect moment. When Pope Leo XIV assumed the pontificate, he encountered this legacy from Pope Francis. Imagine the moment. There he was, with the power to create his first archdiocese wherever he wanted, with all the love for America in his heart, but with an already initiated process demanding his attention in Brazil. What would you have done in that situation? Would you have followed your heart or respected the already initiated process? This question brings us to the heart of the first great spiritual lesson this decision teaches us. According to Vatican sources, Pope Leo XV spent long hours in prayer before the Blessed Sacrament. He knew this first decision would set the tone for his pontificate. His heart was shouting America, but his spirit was whispering obedience. On May 22nd, when it was officially announced that São José do Rio Preto was becoming Pope Leo XIV's first archdiocese, more than just a new ecclesiastical structure was being created. The world was being given a profound lesson about obedience to God's plans, even when those plans don't align with our deepest desires. Dom Antonio Emidio Villar, the new archbishop, expressed something beautiful. It's the conclusion of a process initiated in 2010, when bishops requested the creation of the Archdiocese. It's a joy to see that the entire process, which was begun by Pope Francis, now comes to fruition under Pope Leo XIV. But here in America, many were waiting for something different. The Diocese of Sioux City, a small but historic episcopal seat in Iowa, established in 1902, had been waiting for years for possible elevation. With its 150,000 Catholics spread across 24 counties in northwest Iowa, it represented exactly the type of American local church many hoped the new pope might honor. Sioux City, under Bishop John Keener, who was just appointed in February 2025, had all the qualifications: a rich history of over 120 years, a faithful community, a strategic position in the American Midwest. It was one of those dioceses that, according to experts, had good prospects for elevation to archdiocese status in the framework of American church reorganization. But Pope Leo XIV chose differently. He chose obedience to Pope Francis's legacy, instead of his heart's natural desires. And this choice brings us to the first great lesson. If these reflections are touching your heart, if you feel God is speaking to you through this story, I invite you to subscribe to our channel. Every week we share stories like this that can transform how you see life and strengthen your faith. Don't miss what's coming, because we have much more to share with you. Now we come to the first great spiritual lesson that Pope Leo XIII's decision teaches us: the transformative power of obedience to God's plans, even when those plans go against our deepest desires. Pope Leo XIV gave us an extraordinary example of obedience. His American heart desired to honor our country with the first archdiocese of his pontificate. It was natural, it was understandable, it was human. But when faced with Pope Francis's legacy, with an already initiated process demanding his attention, he chose obedience over his personal preference. This decision teaches us something profound. Obedience to God doesn't always feel good at first, but it always leads us to better places than we could imagine. When we obey God, even when we don't completely understand his reasons, we open the door to blessings that go beyond our greatest dreams. Let me tell you the story of Maria Rodriguez from Phoenix, Arizona, who found herself in a similar situation. Maria was running the family restaurant and had the opportunity to expand into a very profitable location. But it would mean working Sundays and not being able to take her children to Mass. Her heart told her to accept the business opportunity. Her mind screamed that she needed the money to support her employees. But her spirit whispered to keep her priorities in order. Maria decided to reject the expansion and maintain her commitment to Sunday family Mass. 3 months later, a Christian business group heard about her testimony and offered her a partnership in an even better location, with more profit and completely respecting her religious values. "I never thought that obeying God would bring me something better than I could imagine," Maria tells us. Another beautiful story is that of David Thompson, a young man from Dallas who had the opportunity to study law at a prestigious university, but felt in his heart a call to the seminary. His family didn't understand, his friends criticized him, everyone told him he was wasting his intelligence. David struggled for months between what others expected of him and what he felt God was asking. Finally, David chose to obey the call he felt in his heart and entered the seminary. Years later, he became one of the most beloved priests in his diocese, founded a center for helping young people with addiction problems, and has transformed the lives of hundreds of families. Obedience to God led me to a more fulfilling life than I ever dreamed, reflects Father David. There's also the testimony of Jennifer Martinez, a businesswoman from Los Angeles who had the opportunity to expand her company, but it would mean using practices that went against her Christian principles. Jennifer found herself at a crossroads: grow economically or maintain her spiritual integrity. Jennifer chose to maintain her principles even when it meant rejecting million-dollar contracts. At first it was difficult. She lost some clients, But gradually, her reputation for honesty and integrity began attracting clients who valued these principles. Today, her company is more prosperous than ever, and Jennifer has proven you can succeed without compromising Christian values. These stories show us that obedience to God isn't easy, but it's always worth it. When we choose to obey God's plans over our own desires, we're planting seeds of blessing that will bear fruit at the perfect time. Pope Leo XIV, by choosing to obey Pope Francis's legacy, showed us that even the world's most important leaders need to practice obedience. If the Pope can set aside his personal preferences to obey God's plans, how much more do we need to develop this virtue in our lives? Obedience isn't a demonstration of weakness, it's a demonstration of wisdom. When we obey God, we recognize that He sees beyond what we can see, that He has plans greater than we can imagine, that His love for us is deeper than we can understand. In your daily life, obedience to God can manifest in many ways. Forgiving when you don't feel like it, being honest when it would be easier to lie, helping others when you have your own problems, maintaining your values when everyone around you compromises theirs. Every time you choose to obey God in small things, you're developing the spiritual muscle that will allow you to obey Him in big things. Obedience is like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it becomes. Pope Leo XIV's example teaches us that true greatness isn't in doing what we want, but in doing what God wants. His decision to create the first Archdiocese in Brazil instead of America didn't diminish his love for our country. On the contrary, it demonstrated that his love for God is even greater than his love for his homeland. The second great spiritual lesson this historic decision teaches us is about divine patience in God's processes. The Diocese of São José do Rio Preto waited 15 years, from 2010 to 2025, to be elevated to an archdiocese. 15 years may seem like a long time, but in God's timing, it's exactly the perfect time. Have you ever wondered why God sometimes seems to take so long to answer our prayers? Why some processes in our lives seem eternal? The story of this archdiocese gives us a beautiful answer. God doesn't arrive late. He arrives at the exact moment. During those 15 years of waiting, many things were happening in the Diocese of São José do Rio Preto. New priests were being formed, new churches were being built, communities were being strengthened, people's hearts were being prepared to receive this new responsibility. God was preparing everything for the perfect moment. The same thing happens in our lives. When we pray for something and it seems God isn't responding, it's not that He's not listening to us. It's that He's preparing all the circumstances, all the people, all the details, so His response will be perfect and arrive at the exact moment. Think about your own life. Is there something you've been praying for a long time? A job, a relationship, healing, an answer? Instead of despairing over God's apparent delay, consider the possibility that He's preparing something much better than you can imagine. The 15 years São José do Rio Preto waited teach us that God's time isn't wasted time. During those years, the diocese didn't remain motionless waiting. It continued working, continued growing, continued serving. And when the perfect moment arrived, it was completely prepared to assume its new responsibility. This is a powerful lesson for us. While we wait for God's response, we shouldn't remain motionless. We should continue growing, continue serving, continue preparing, because when God's perfect moment arrives, we'll be ready to receive what He has prepared for us. The 15-year process also teaches us about persistence in prayer. The Brazilian bishops didn't ask once for the diocese's elevation and forget about it. They maintained their request, renewed it, trusted that God would respond in His perfect time. Their patience and persistence were rewarded. In our prayers, we need the same combination: persistence to keep asking and patience to wait for God's response. It's not contradictory to pray constantly for something while also having patience to wait. It's the perfect combination of active faith and quiet trust. The moment the diocese's elevation was announced, May 22nd, 2025, wasn't coincidence. It was the perfect moment in God's plan. Pope Leo XIV needed to make his first major decision. The diocese was prepared to assume its new responsibility, and the Catholic world needed to see an example of obedience and patience rewarded. If we could see from God's perspective, we'd understand there's no such thing as divine delay, only perfect timing. What seems like delay to us is preparation to God. What seems like silence to us is invisible but constant work to God. God's patience with us is also extraordinary. He doesn't tire of our repetitive prayers, doesn't get annoyed by our anxiety, doesn't become impatient with our doubts. He knows we're human, that we live in this world's limited time, and He has infinite patience with our limitations. Dom Antonio Emidio Villar, the new Archbishop, will receive the pallium from Pope Leo. Pater's hands on June 29th in a Vatican ceremony. It will be his first meeting with the new Pope. This moment, which has been waited for 15 years, will finally arrive in God's perfect time. If you're in a waiting process in your life, if you feel God is taking too long to answer your prayers, remember the story of São José do Rio Preto. God hasn't forgotten you, hasn't abandoned you, isn't ignoring your requests. He's preparing something beautiful for you, and it will arrive at the exact moment. If this message is strengthening your faith and helping you better understand God's timing, I invite you to subscribe to our channel. Every week we share teachings that will help you grow spiritually and better understand God's ways in your life. The third great spiritual lesson this historic decision teaches us is about the humility of small places and how God chooses the simple to do extraordinary things. São José do Rio Preto isn't Rome, isn't Paris, isn't New York. It's a city in Brazil's interior, hard-working, simple, where people live their faith without great fanfare. Why did God choose this place and not a great metropolis to be Pope Leo? Or for his first archdiocese? The answer reveals something beautiful about God's heart. He's not impressed by size, fame, or power. He looks at faithfulness, constancy, authenticity. For almost 100 years since 1929, the Diocese of São José do Rio Preto has faithfully served its people. It hasn't sought spotlights, hasn't created scandals, hasn't attracted worldwide attention. It has simply done its job, forming Christian families, educating children in faith, accompanying young people, caring for the sick, comforting the afflicted. It's like the parable of the faithful servant Jesus told us. The servant who administered the 5 talents well received the same congratulation as the one who administered the 2 talents well. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in little, I will set you over much. God doesn't measure our value by the amount of talent we have, but by the faithfulness with which we use what He has given us. São José do Rio Preto represents all of us who live in common places, who have normal jobs, who lead simple lives. This elevation to an archdiocese is like a personal message from God to each of us. Your place matters, your life has value, your faithfulness doesn't go unnoticed. In a world that constantly bombards us with messages telling us we need to be famous, rich, successful, or spectacular to have value, God reminds us that He appreciates silent faithfulness, constant service, simple but genuine faith. Think about your own life. Might it be that while you despise your place, your job, your situation, God is seeing something beautiful that you don't see? Might it be that while you dream of being somewhere else, God has extraordinary plans for you exactly where you are? Here in America, the Diocese of Sioux City represents exactly this type of reality. A small diocese in Iowa, with its cathedral, of St. Columba, with its 150,000 Catholics spread across 24 counties in the rural Midwest. It's not a see that makes international headlines, but it's a local church that for more than 120 years has faithfully served God's people. Sioux City, with its history beginning in 1902, has formed generations of Christians, has accompanied families. In moments of joy and sorrow, has kept faith alive in difficult times. Bishop John Keener and his predecessors have worked silently, just like São José do Rio Preto, not seeking fame, but seeking faithfulness. This reminds us of Jesus' words, "Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies? Yet not one of them is forgotten by God." If God doesn't forget the smallest sparrows, much less does he forget small cities, simple lives, humble people. Pope Leo XIV's decision teaches us to value our personal São José do Rio Preto, or our Sioux City. Maybe you live in a small town and dream of the big city. Maybe you work at something you consider common and dream of something more important. Maybe your life seems too ordinary and you dream of something extraordinary. But God is telling you today, through this story, that there are no small places in his plans, no insignificant lives in his kingdom, no unimportant jobs when they're done with love and faithfulness. Your place, your job, your life have extraordinary value in God's eyes. The humility of São José do Rio Preto also reminds us of Bethlehem's humility, where Jesus was born. It was a small city without political or economic importance, but God chose it for history's most important event, or Nazareth's humility, where Jesus grew up. It was so insignificant that Nathanael asked, "Can anything good come from Nazareth?" God has a special preference for humble places, simple people, ordinary situations, not because he despises greatness, but because in humility he finds more open hearts, less contaminated by pride, more willing to recognize that all good comes from him. When Dom Antonio Emidio Villar is installed as Archbishop on July 9th, he won't just be assuming a new responsibility. He'll be representing all of us who serve God in simple places, with limited means, but with great hearts. His elevation is our elevation. His recognition is our recognition. This lesson about the humility of small places invites us to change our perspective. Instead of despising our place, let's learn to appreciate it. Instead of undervaluing our opportunities, let's make the most of them. Instead of constantly dreaming of being elsewhere, let's invest our best effort in being faithful where God has placed us. If this message is helping you appreciate your place in life more and better understand God's plans, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We want to continue accompanying you in your spiritual growth with content that strengthens your faith and helps you see life from God's perspective. Now we come to a very important moment. How can we identify the spiritual signs this historic decision is sending us? The elevation of São José do Rio Preto to an archdiocese isn't just ecclesiastical news. It's a message from God to each of us about how he works in our lives. The first spiritual sign we must recognize is that God is constantly preparing new things in our lives, even if we don't see them. For 15 years, while the diocese waited for its elevation, God was working silently, preparing the perfect moment, aligning circumstances, forming the right people. In your life, God is also working constantly, even if you don't see it. That difficult situation you're experiencing could be God preparing you for something better. That weight that makes you despair could be God perfecting the details of his plan for you. That no you received could be God protecting you from something that wasn't right for you. The second spiritual sign is that God's plans always involve other people. The elevation of São José do Rio Preto didn't just benefit that diocese, but also the dioceses of Barretos, Catanduva, Jales, and Votuporanga, which now form part of the new ecclesiastical province. God's plans always have a community impact. This means when God blesses you, it's not just for you. Your blessing is designed to bless others, your family, your community, your church, your work. God doesn't work individually, but communally. Your spiritual growth affects everyone around you. The third spiritual sign is that God uses long processes to prepare lasting blessings. The 15 years of waiting weren't wasted time, they were preparation time. Instant blessings often fade quickly, but blessings that come after a long process are usually more solid and lasting. If you're in a long process in your life, if you feel God is taking too long to respond, it could be a sign that He's preparing something great and lasting for you. God's long processes produce solid results that will withstand the test of time. The fourth spiritual sign is that God honors constant faithfulness more than spectacular achievements. San Jose de Rio Preto wasn't chosen for doing something extraordinary, but for being faithful for almost 100 years in ordinary things. God saw decades of faithful service, families formed in faith, communities strengthened in love. In your life, God is also seeing your daily faithfulness, how you treat your family, how you do your work, how you live your faith in the everyday. Those acts of faithfulness that no one sees, that no one applauds, that seem insignificant, are extraordinarily precious to God. The fifth spiritual sign is that God chooses specific moments to reveal His plans. The diocese's elevation was announced on May 22, 2025, becoming Pope Leo XIV's first archdiocese. It wasn't coincidence, it was God's perfect timing. In your life, God also has specific moments to reveal His plans, to open doors, to answer prayers. Your job is to remain faithful, keep trusting, continue praying until His perfect moment arrives. How can we apply these spiritual signs in our daily lives? First, by developing an attitude of positive expectation. Knowing that God is constantly working in our lives, we can live with hope, looking for signs of His activity, paying attention to opportunities He places on our path. Second, by appreciating long processes instead of despairing over them. If you're in a season of waiting, instead of getting frustrated, ask yourself, what is God trying to teach me in this process? How is He preparing me for what's coming? Third, by remaining faithful in small and daily things. You don't need to do spectacular things to get God's attention. He already sees you, already knows you, already appreciates your daily faithfulness. Continue being faithful where you are, with what you have in current circumstances. Fourth, by praying for discernment to recognize God's timing. Ask Him to help you recognize when He's opening doors, when He's closing chapters, when He's starting something new in your life. The story of San Jose de Rio Preto teaches us that God is constantly sending us signs of His love and His plans for us. We just need spiritual eyes to see them and open hearts to receive them. Every circumstance in your life, every encounter you have, every opportunity that presents itself could be a sign from God guiding you toward His purpose for your life. The sixth spiritual sign we must recognize is that God works through the obedience of His leaders to bless us. Pope Leo XIV could have chosen to create his first archdiocese in America, following his heart, but his obedience to the plan already begun by Pope Francis resulted in a blessing for thousands of Brazilian families. This teaches us that when spiritual leaders obey God, even when it's difficult, that obedience becomes a blessing for many. And it also teaches us that our own obedience to God doesn't just benefit us, but becomes a blessing for others. The seventh spiritual sign is that God uses spiritual legacies from previous generations to bless current generations. Pope Francis initiated this process, and Pope Leo XV completed it. One generation plants, another waters, and God gives the growth. In your family, your church, your community, there are spiritual legacies that previous generations have left. Prayers, sacrifices, acts of faith, decisions of obedience. Those legacies might be manifesting in blessings for you now, even without you realizing it. How can we be more sensitive to these spiritual signs in our daily lives? First, by dedicating daily time to prayer and reflection. In silence, in quietness, is where we can best hear God's voice and recognize His signs. Second, by regularly studying God's Word. The Bible is like a manual for interpreting divine signs. The more we know the Word, the better we can recognize how God speaks and acts in our lives. Third, by seeking counsel from spiritually mature people. Sometimes we need outside eyes to see what we can't see. A pastor, spiritual mentor, a mature believing friend can help us interpret the signs God is sending us. The story of San José de Rio Preto reminds us that God is constantly communicating with us, sending us signs of His love, His plans, His presence. We're not alone, we're not abandoned, we're not forgotten. God is actively involved in our lives, working all things together for our good. Now we come to the most practical part of everything we've learned. How can we apply these powerful spiritual lessons in our daily lives? The story of Pope Leo XIII and the first Archdiocese of his pontificate shouldn't remain just as information, but transform into personal transformation. The first practical application is to develop an attitude of active obedience in daily decisions. Just as the Pope chose to obey the plan inherited from Pope Francis, we can choose to obey God in the small decisions of each day. When you feel the temptation to lie, choose truth. When you want revenge, choose forgiveness. When invited to do something you know isn't right, choose to say no. Obedience develops like a muscle. It starts with small decisions and grows to big decisions. Every time you choose to obey God in something small, you're strengthening your capacity to obey Him in more important things. The second practical application is learning to value and make the most of waiting times. Instead of despairing when things don't happen as fast as you'd like, ask yourself, what does God want to teach me in this waiting time? How can I use this time to grow spiritually? Waiting times aren't wasted times, they're preparation times. Use your waiting time to study the Bible more, to strengthen your family relationships, to develop new skills, to serve more in your community. When God's moment comes, you'll be completely prepared. The third practical application is learning to find purpose and meaning in your current place, no matter how small or insignificant it seems to you. San José de Rio Preto teaches us there are no small places in God's plans, only people who haven't discovered the purpose God has for them where they are. Ask yourself, how can I best serve God exactly where I am now? What needs are there in my family, my work, my community that I can help meet? How can I be a blessing to others in my current situation? The fourth practical application is developing a deeper and more constant prayer life. Pope Leo XIV spent hours in prayer before making his decision. We also need to dedicate quality time to prayer, not just asking for things, but listening to what God wants to tell us. Establish a specific daily time for prayer. It could be early morning, before the day's noise begins, or at night when everything is quiet. Use this time to talk with God about your decisions, your concerns, your dreams, and also to listen to what He wants to tell you. The fifth practical application is learning to recognize and value the spiritual legacies you've received. Maybe your parents or grandparents prayed for you. Maybe someone planted seeds of faith in your life that are now bearing fruit. Recognize these legacies and commit to also leaving a spiritual legacy for following generations. What spiritual legacy? Do you want to leave your children, your grandchildren, your community? What prayers do you want to plant today that will bear fruit in the future? What decisions of obedience do you want to make today that will bless others tomorrow? The sixth practical application is cultivating an attitude of positive expectation about God's plans for your life. Instead of living with anxiety about the future or resentment about the past, live with expectation about what God is preparing for you. Every day when you wake up, say, "Lord, what do you have prepared for me today? How do you want to use me to bless others? What growth opportunity will you give me?" This attitude of positive expectation will help you recognize opportunities God places on your path. The seventh practical application is committing to be faithful in small and daily things. Don't wait for big opportunities to be faithful to God. Be faithful in your daily work, in treating your family, in your ordinary responsibilities. Faithfulness in the small is what prepares you for big responsibilities. Remember that São José do Rio Preto wasn't chosen for doing something spectacular, but for being faithful for almost 100 years in ordinary things. Your daily faithfulness, even if no one sees it, even if no one applauds it, is extraordinarily valuable to God. These practical applications aren't just suggestions, they're invitations from God for you to live a fuller, more meaningful life, more aligned with His purposes. The story of Pope Leo XIV and his first Archdiocese isn't just ecclesiastical history, it's a personal invitation for you to also live a life of obedience, patience, humility, and faithfulness. As you finish watching this video, don't let these teachings remain only in your mind. Take them to your heart, apply them in your life, share them with others, because when we live these principles, we not only transform our own lives, but we become God's instruments to transform the lives of others. We've reached the end of this deep reflection, but in reality, we're at the beginning of a new way of understanding God's plans for our lives. The story of Pope Leo XIV and his first Archdiocese has taught us lessons that can completely transform our spiritual perspective. We've learned that obedience to God, even when it goes against our deepest desires, always leads us to better places than we could imagine. Pope Leo XIV wanted to honor America with his first Archdiocese, but his obedience to God's plan resulted in an extraordinary blessing for Brazil and a powerful lesson for the entire world. We've discovered that God's waiting. Times aren't delays, but preparations. The 15 years São José do Rio Preto waited weren't wasted time, but preparation time to receive a greater responsibility. In your life, those waiting times that make you so desperate could be God preparing you for something extraordinary. We've understood that God isn't impressed by size, fame, or power, but appreciates faithfulness, constancy, and authenticity. São José do Rio Preto isn't a world metropolis, but it's a diocese that has been faithful for almost 100 years, and that faithfulness was rewarded by God. We've learned to recognize the spiritual signs God constantly sends us, and we've discovered practical applications for living these truths in our daily lives. It's not just about knowing these truths, but living them, applying them, allowing them to transform our hearts and our actions. But the deepest lesson of all is this: God has a specific, unique, and beautiful plan for your life, just as He chose São José do Rio Preto to be Pope Leo XIV's first Archdiocese. He has chosen you for a special purpose in this world. Your life isn't coincidence. Your current situation isn't an accident. Your place at this moment isn't coincidence. God is writing a beautiful story with your life, and every chapter, even those that seem difficult or senseless, have a purpose. In His perfect plan, the moments of obedience, the waiting times, the humble places, the small responsibilities, all form part of the masterpiece God is creating with your life. Imagine for a moment how your life would be if you really believed this. If you really believed that God has specific and beautiful plans for you, how would it change your attitude? How would it change your way of facing challenges? How would it change your way of seeing opportunities? The story we've shared today isn't just about an archdiocese in Brazil or a pope's decisions. It's about you, about me, about every person seeking to understand and live God's purposes. It's an invitation to trust more deeply, to obey more completely, to wait more patiently, to serve more faithfully. When Dom Antonio Emidio Villar receives the pallium from Pope Leo XIV's hands on June 29th, he won't just be receiving a symbol of ecclesiastical authority. He'll be receiving confirmation that God honors faithfulness, rewards patience, and elevates the humble. And you too can receive that confirmation in your life. Every time you choose to obey God, every time you decide to wait in His timing, every time you serve faithfully where He has placed you, you're positioning yourself to receive the blessings He has prepared for you. We don't know what Pope Leo XIV's next important decision will be, but we know it will be made with the same attitude of prayer, obedience, and seeking God's will that characterized this first decision, and we can adopt that same attitude in our own decisions, big and small. The next time you have to make an important decision, remember Pope Leo XIV spending hours in prayer before deciding. The next time you have to wait for something you really want, remember San Jose de Rio Preto's 15 years of waiting. The next time you feel your place in life is too small or insignificant, remember that God chose an interior city to make history. Your life matters, your decisions have eternal consequences, your faithfulness is being observed by God. You're not insignificant, you're not forgotten, you're not an accident. You're part of God's beautiful and perfect plan for this world. If this message has touched your heart, if you feel God has spoken to you through this story, don't keep this treasure just for yourself. Share this video with your family, your friends, the people you love. Maybe someone needs to hear exactly this today. Share in the comments how this story has impacted your life. Is there an area where you need to practice more obedience? Is there a situation where you need to have more patience? Is there a place in your life you need to value more? Your testimony might be exactly what another person needs to read. If this content has strengthened your faith and helped you better understand God's ways, make sure to subscribe to our channel and activate notifications. Every week we share teachings that can transform your spiritual life and help you live closer to God's purposes. Give this video a thumbs up if it has been a blessing to you, and share it with everyone who might need to hear this message of hope and purpose. Together we can create a community of people who live with faith, hope, and purpose, following the example of obedience and faithfulness that Pope Leo XIV has given us. Always remember, God has beautiful plans for your life, plans for good and not for evil, to give you a future and hope. Your story isn't finished, your purpose hasn't been completely fulfilled, your best days may still be ahead of you. May God's peace, which surpasses all understanding, guard your heart and mind. May His love strengthen you in difficult moments. May His wisdom guide you in important decisions, and may His faithfulness sustain you in times of waiting. Until the next video, may God bless you abundantly and use you powerfully to bless others. Your life has purpose, your story has meaning, and your days are in God's loving hands.